Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah chair. We're holding in the Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we'll be learning today Mirat Hashem Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tefillin and we continue to learn the technical details of the preparation of Tefillin. We pick up today 2 lines from the bottom of Mem Beis Amud Beis, Siman Lamed Beis Sif Ches. Says the Mechaber, Tzarech HaKlaf Lihiyos Mu'ubad Ba'afotzim Oy Besid. The klaf that's used to write the tefillin has to be mu'ubad. It has to be tanned and prepared using afatzim, using the juice of gall nuts, oy besid, or using lime. V'tzarech sheyeh mu'ubad lishmai. And this ibud process has to be done lishma. It has to be done lishem kedushas tefillin. Now we'll see exactly what that means. The Mechaber himself qualifies that a little bit. Says the Mechaber, Toiv lahoitzi bisvasav betchilas ibud. It would be proper, it is good, that one should make a verbal declaration at the beginning of the ibud process, shehu ma'abdoi l'shem tefillin, that he is doing the ibud l'shma, l'shem mitzvahs tefillin, oi l'shem sefer Torah. Or he could say that he is preparing the klaf lishma, but not l'shem tefillin, l'shem sefer Torah. The kedusha of a sefer Torah is a higher level than the kedusha of tefillin. And like we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, yesh bechlal mosayim moneh. If you say that you're preparing it lishma, l'shem kedushas sefer Torah, since the kedusha of a sefer Torah is greater than the kedusha of the tefillin, if you prepared it l'shem sefer Torah, it is definitely done having the necessary level of kedusha for tefillin. So by saying that you're doing it l'shem sefer Torah, you're covering l'shem tefillin as well. However, says the Mechaber, top line Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, im ibda l'shem mezuzah, if you would prepare the klaf l'shem kedushas mezuzah, then the klaf would be puzzled to use for tefillin. Why? Because the kedusha of the mezuzah is a notch lower than the kedusha of tefillin. So it's very nice that you prepared the klaf l'shem kedushas mezuzah, but you didn't reach the level of kedushas tefillin, and therefore you would not be able to use this klaf for tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chav Gimel on Mem Beis Amud Beis. The Mechaber said that the klaf has to be mu'ubid using afatzim oy besid. Says the Chavetz Chaim uleikuvahu. This is ma'akev. If you do the tanning process and you don't use afatzim or sid, then this klaf would not be usable for tefillin. D'loi mikri klaf b'loi zeh, because if you do the tanning process without these ingredients, loi mikri klaf b'loi zeh. It's not going to be called klaf. Rak diftera, the resultant material that you would have if you do some kind of a process without afatzim or sid would be called diftera, not klaf, and therefore you could not use it for tefillin. Continues the Mishnah Berurah and he says, V'yaniach ha'ara besid, in order to do the ibud process properly for tefillin, you would leave the hide in sid, in lime, ad sheyipal ha'seyar be'elav, until the hair of the animal falls off of the hide by itself, without having to subject the hide to any scraping. So you prepare this lime preparation, you put in the hide to soak, and the hair will fall off. If the hair did not yet fall off, but it's necessary for you to scrape the hair off, then the ibud was not done properly. If you take the hide out of the lime before all of the hair comes off on its own, lo yichtav alav. Then the Mishnah Berurah says you should not write tefillin on this klaf. The heavy diftera adayin upasel, because again, at that point in the tanning process, it would still be called diftera, not klaf, and it would be puzzle. Says the Mishnah Berurah, yesh shecholik, there are those that disagree with this psak v'kasav, and they write, the sefer shahitzia oros la'acha arba'a yamim, if the sefer removes the hide from the lime preparation after 4 days, and and still you find that the hair has not fallen off on its own, Nira de b'diavad ein kpeda. The Mishnah Berurah says it would seem that at least b'diavad that would be okay. As long as you had it soaking for 4 days, it's already enough, even if the hairs did not come off on their own. Nira de b'diavad ein kpeda. The loy talya b'seyar klal, because the truth is, this shita holds that the tanning has nothing to do with reaching the point of the hair falling off. That's regardless. Even if the hair didn't fall off on its own, still, if you left it in there for 4 days, that is already considered iwud. The kev the kvar hunach basid v'niskan kahogen loy mikri diftera, since you already soaked it in sid, and it has become prepared to be used. Loy mikri diftera, it's no longer called diftera. Ayin sham. Okay, ois katan chav dalad. The Mechaber said that it is toiv. It would be good lahaitzi b'svasav, to make a verbal declaration b'tchilas ibud at the beginning of the ibud process, saying that you're doing this l'shem tefillin or l'shem sefer Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah kan chav dalad b'svasav, you should speak it out verbally with your lips. Ub'di'eved dayoy b'machshava, but b'di'eved, if you did not speak it out, if you did not make a verbal declaration, but you had it in mind, it was only b'machshava, it was only in your mind, b'di'eved, that would be enough. Ois katan chav hey. The Mechaber said that you should do this b'tchilas ha'ibud, at the beginning of the ibud process. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the yoiser ein tzarich loy lahoitzi b'svasav v'loy lachshav shemis abdim lishma. Very interesting. The Mechaber told us that the ibud has to be done lishma. In order to make sure that the ibud is done lishma, the Mechaber said, toiv, it would be good, lahoitzi b'svasav b'tchilas ibud, to speak out at the beginning of the ibud process, shuhu ma'abdai l'shem tefillin or l'shem sefer Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here in Ois Katan Chav Hey, let's be medayik in the Mechaber. The Mechaber said that you should make this declaration when? B'tchilas ibud, at the beginning of the tanning process. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, the yoiser, after the beginning of the tanning process, ein tzarich, you no longer need loy lahoitzi b'svasav, not to make any verbal declarations, and v'loy lakshav shemis abdim lishma. You don't even have to think that you're doing it lishma. Elo b'tchilase b'lvad. It's only at the beginning of the ibud process that you have to make a verbal declaration and say that I'm doing it lishma. But after that, you could turn your mind off. You could be doing it literally mindlessly. You don't even have to have in mind that you're doing it lishma. Why? Let's continue in the Mishnah Berurah. And this is true v'afilu nimshach ha'ibud kama yomim. We see that the ibud process, the Mishnah Berurah mentioned earlier, if you left it in the sid for 4 days. So we see that the ibud process can take a lengthy amount of time. Still, in all, says the Mishnah Berurah, even if the ibud is going to take several days, it's enough to make a verbal declaration at the beginning and you don't need anything more. Now the Mishnah Berurah explains why. Because the rule is, Dechala oiseh, anybody who's doing something, al das rishona hu oiseh. He's doing it according to his mindset at the beginning of the activity. Since over here at the beginning of the ibud, he verbally stated that he's doing it l'shem mitzvahs tefillin, or l'shem mezuzah, l'shem sefer Torah, that remains in place. The assumption is that everything that he does from that point on is lishma, is either l'shem tefillin or l'shem sefer Torah, because whatever he said he's doing at the outset, that's what he's doing. Even if the fact is that he doesn't have it in mind, it doesn't matter. Once he made that declaration at the beginning, everything that he does now is al das that declaration. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, Tchilas of ibud mikri, what do we consider to be the tchilas of ibud? Kishemesim ha'oiros l'soich hasid, that's when you take the action of putting the hides into the lime. That's called the beginning of the process. However, there's a step before putting the hide into the lime, and that is taking the hides and soaking them in water. You're not required to mention that you're doing this l'shem tefillin or l'shem sefer Torah when you go to put it in the water. Putting the hides in the water is not seen as the beginning of the tanning process. You're not using any chemicals. You're just soaking it. It's only when you go and you put it in the sid, when you're getting ready to put it in the lime, that's what we call the beginning of the ibud process. But just soaking it in water is not yet considered part of the ibud process. The Mechaber told us that we should make a verbal declaration that we're doing the ibud either l'shem Tefillin or l'shem Sefer Torah, but not l'shem mezuzah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chavav, l'shem Sefer Torah, the kedusha chamura mitfillin, because the kedusha of a Sefer Torah is greater than the kedusha of Tefillin. Ubechlal masayim maneh, and literally within 200 there is 100. What does this mean? What he means is, if you're saying that you're doing it l'shem kedusha Sefer Torah, the kedusha of Sefer Torah is greater than the kedusha of Tefillin. So certainly you invested the klaf with the kedusha of Tefillin. You said that you're doing this ibud lishma to invest it with the kedusha of Sefer Torah, but the kedusha of Sefer Torah is greater than the kedusha of mezuzah. So if you have l'shem Sefer Torah, you already cover l'shem Tefillin. Va'afal pikein. And now, the Mishnah Berurah tells us a little bit of a chiddush. You might have thought not like this. Let's say you go ahead and you do the ibud l'shem Sefer Torah. Now I would have thought maybe once you do the ibud of the klaf l'shem Sefer Torah, who said you're now allowed to go take the klaf and use it for tefillin? Maybe we say ma'ilin b'kodesh ve'ein meridin. Since when you did the ibud of the klaf, you had in mind the kedusha chamura of the Sefer Torah, who says you're allowed to use it for tefillin? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, that's not the case. You can. Says the Mishnah Berurah, va'afal pikein mutar l'shanos l'tefillin u'lemezuzos. Even if you did the ibud of the klaf l'shem Sefer Torah, you're still allowed to use that klaf later for tefillin or even for mezuzos. After kedushas of kala mimena, even though that's a lesser kedusha than a Sefer Torah. Aval l'dvar choil also l'shanosai, but you would not be allowed to use this klaf for a dvar choil, for a mundane purpose. What would be a mundane purpose? Well, let's say the writing of a get. It also has to be written with ksav ashuris. You need a cipher to do it. You don't need klaf. A get does not have to be written on klaf. But certainly, that would be considered a davar choil. You're allowed. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, if you did the ibud l'shem Sefer Torah, now you could take it down a notch and you could use that klaf l'shem Tefillin, even though that's a lesser kedusha than Sefer Torah. But you want to use the klaf for chulin, you want to use it for something that has no kedusha at all, that you cannot do. Levad im hisne beferish, unless you made a tnai beferish, betchilas ibudan, at the beginning of the ibud process, sheyehei mutar l'shanosai af l'dvar choil. Oh, so what are we saying so far over here? You have to do the ibud lishma. Said the Mechaber, when you do the ibud for the tefillin, you could even do the ibud l'shem Sefer Torah. That way now you have options. You're a sefer, you're doing ibud, you prepared klaf, do it l'shem Sefer Torah. Now you want to use it for a Sefer Torah, go ahead. You want to use it for tefillin, you can, because tefillin is a lower kedusha. If the klaf was invested with the kedusha of Sefer Torah, it definitely has the kedusha of tefillin. Could you use it for a davar shel chayil? No, you can't use it for a davar shel chayil, unless you make a tanai. What's the tanai? Says the Mishnah Berurah, levad im hisne beferish betchilas ibudan sheyehe mutar l'shanosai af l'dvar chayil. You could make a tanai when you do the ibud, that I'm doing the ibud l'shem Sefer Torah, l'shem Tefillin, l'shem Sefer Torah, but I'm doing it al tanai, that if I change my mind and I want to use it for a davar shel chayil, I should be allowed to use it for a davar shel chayil. Oz mutar l'shanosai. If you make this tanai beferish, you speak it out. When you start to make the ibud on the klaf, then later you can even change it and use it for a davar shel chayil. V'hanochain, now the Mishnah Berurah says, but the proper way to make this tanai would be, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hanochain, sheyenagu kein asayfrim lechatchila, This is the way the Seifrim should act. This is what they should do lechatchila. Be'es shemesimim ha'oros l'soich hasid. When they go to put the hide into the lime, which we said earlier, that's the true beginning of the ibud process. So when they go to put the oros in the sid, sheyomru, they should say, ani noisein oros elu l'soich hasid. I am placing these hides into the lime, l'shem kedusha sefer Torah, having in mind the kedusha of the sefer Torah. So now you could use it for a sefer Torah, or you could use it for tefillin. Va'ani masne, and I'm making a tanai, likishe ertze, that should I desire to in the future, she'uchal l'shanosai l'chol davar, that I should be able to change this, and I should be able to use this klaf for anything, even for a davar shachol. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's the form that the Tanai should take. What is that form? The form is, I am doing the ibud l'shem kedusha sefer Torah. So I'm specifying that I'm doing the ibud l'shem kedusha sefer Torah, but I'm making a Tanai. The Tanai is that should I want to change my mind, I should be allowed to use it for a davar shachol. Then you're allowed to use it for a davar shachol. But look what you did. You did it l'shem kedusha sefer Torah. You very clearly identified that you're doing the ibud l'shem kedusha sefer Torah. You just left yourself an out. You made a tanai that should I want to change it, I should be allowed to change it. Now this stands in contrast to what the Mishnah Berurah is going to say now. V'loi k'moshe nagu ha-seifrim, and do not try to make the tanai in the way that some seifrim try to make it. Sha'imrim, where they say l'shem sefer Torah, I'm doing the ibud of the klaf l'shem sefer Torah, oy tefillin, or maybe I'm doing it l'shem tefillin, oy mezuzos, or maybe I'm doing it l'shem mezuzah, oy shar dvar rishus, or maybe I'm doing it for a davar sheberishus. What is this guy trying to do? In the first case, the way the Mishnah Berurah said it should be done, what the person did is, he said very clearly that he's doing the ibud l'shem sefer Torah. So the ibud was done l'shem kedusha sefer Torah. He's just putting in an out clause. He's creating a tanai. He's saying, if I want to change it, I should be allowed to change it. So the kedusha sefer Torah is being put on this klaf al tanai. If I want to change it, I can change it. In the second case, we don't know what he's doing. He never did anything specific. He said, I might be doing it for a sefer Torah, or I might be doing it for tefillin, or I might be doing it for mezuzah, or I might be doing it for a davar shebechulin, for a davar shachol. So you know what? He didn't do it with anything. What's he trying to employ? He's trying to employ Berurah. He's trying to say that whatever I use it for, at the end, it should now be Giloy Lamafreya. Now, retroactively, it should be understood that when I did the ibud, I did it for that. So I'm saying, I might be doing it for sefer Torah, I might be doing it for tefillin, I might be doing it for mezuzah, I might be doing it for davar shachulin, to write a get. Okay, so how do we know what we did? Well, we'll employ Berurah. If next week you see that I take this klaf, and I'm using it for a sefer Torah, so then huvrar hadavar lemafreya, it became clear retroactively that what I did was for sefer Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that doesn't work. And the reason that doesn't work is because by a daraisidik requirement, like the requirement of Lishma, we do not employ Berurah. Because that, the Achrayim have a suffix whether or not it works. Where he has a discussion about this. Let's take a look at it. It's a very short little Bir halacha. Bir halacha dibra maskel oy l'shem sefer Torah. It's most of the way down to the Bir halacha here in Mem Gimel Laman Aleph. Ayin Mishnah Berurah b'masha kasavnu v'loy kishem Moshe na'agu ha'seifrim. Take a look at what I wrote in Mishnah Berurah, how you got to make the Tanai, but not the way some seifrim make it, where they say, maybe I'm doing it for this, or maybe I'm doing it for that, or maybe I'm doing it for this. Whoops, wrong one. Ayin sham hatam. The reason for this is the b'daraisa kaimalon ein brera, because for a requirement that's midaraisa, we do not employ brera. If you hold that the requirement of ibud lishma is not a daraisa, only a darabanan, then yesh lahakal b'diavad. Then b'diavad you would be allowed to be makel, and you could rely on this brera v'tzarich iyon lamaisa, says the Chavetz Chaim. Okay, now we go to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Zayin. The Mechaber said when you do the ibud, you should set out doing the ibud lishma. You should make a verbal declaration that you're either doing it l'shem Tefillin or l'shem Sefer Torah. But if you do the ibud l'shem mezuzah, then it's possible to use for Tefillin. Why? Because the kedusha of a mezuzah is less than the kedusha of Tefillin. So it's very nice that you invested this klaf with the kedusha of mezuzah, because you did it l'shem kedushas mezuzah, but you did not invest it with the necessary level of kedusha for Tefillin. That's a greater level than mezuzah, and you only said that you were doing it l'shem mezuzah. You didn't say l'shem Tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Chav Ches Chav Zayin Pasel v'loy mahani rak l'mezuzah b'lvad. If you did it l'shem kedushas mezuzah, then the ibud lishma would only work for mezuzah. The kedushas kala mitfillin, because the mezuzah has a lesser kedusha than tefillin. V'im ibeid l'tefillin, and if you did the ibud lishma l'shem tefillin, mahani af l'mezuzah. So that ibud would be enough to cover a mezuzah. You did the ibud l'shem kedushas tefillin. Kedushas tefillin is greater than the kedusha mezuzah. So now you could use it either for tefillin or for mezuzah. V'loy l'sefer Torah, but you will not be able to use it for a sefer Torah. V'im ibeid ha'ar l'shem ritzuos. Let's say you did the ibud of the hide l'shem, that you're going to use it for the ritzuos, for the leather straps of the tefillin. Loy mahani l'chtei parshiyas alav. You would not be allowed to use it as a parchment to write the parshiyas of the tefillin on it. Im also achakach klaf behen. If you went ahead and you made klaf out of this leather. Why? The kedushas al chamura, because the kedusha of the parshiyas is greater than the kedusha of the ritzuos. So if you did the ibud lishma l'shem kedusha of the ritzuos, you then later cannot make klaf out of it and use it for the parshiyas of the tefillin. Va'afilu lasis behem arbatim yesh nami the puzzle. If you went and you did the ibud on the hides l'shem ritzuos, you wouldn't even be allowed to use that leather now to make batim for the tefillin, because the kedusha of the batim is higher than the kedusha of the ritzuos. Okay, now we go to Siftes. Second line in the Shulchan Aruch says the Mechaber. Im ibdai einoi Yehudi. If an einoi Yehudi, a non-Jew, did the tanning process, the ibud process of the leather to turn it into klaf, says the Mechaber laharambam. We have here a machlekes rishonim. Laharambam apostle. According to the Rambam, this is puzzle and the klaf cannot be used. Afilu amar lo Yisrael la'abed lishmai. And this is true even if there was a Yisrael oimed al gabav, there was a Yisrael standing over the Eina Yehudi, and the Yisrael instructed the Eina Yehudi that he should do it lishma. Still, the Rambam holds this puzzle. Ulaharash kasher, but according to the Rush, it would be kasher im Yisrael oimed al gabav, if there's a Yisrael standing over him, the siyai, and the Yisrael even does something significant to help him in the work that he's doing on the tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Ches. The Mechaber said if the ibud was done by an Eino Yehudi, so that according to the Rambam it's puzzle, and the Mechaber said that's true even if the Yisrael instructed the Eino Yehudi to do the ibud l'shem kedushas tefillin. In other words, a Yid could explain to an Eino Yehudi, he could tell him, look, we have a requirement that when you do the ibud on the klaf, when you prepare the klaf for use, you should have in mind that you're doing it for the holiness of tefillin. So, says the Mechaber, according to the Rambam, that doesn't help. If an Eino Yehudi did it, it's puzzle. Even if you instructed him like this, that he should do it l'shma, it's still puzzle. According to the Rush, it's okay. Okay, let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Afilu. Why does the Rambam hold that this is no good? Tisfir Rambam, because the Rambam holds The akum oisa adaita denafshe. The Rambam holds that when a non-Jew does something, he does it for his own intentions. And he doesn't care what you're telling him. The fact that you told him to do it l'shem kedushas tefillin, he doesn't know what kedushas tefillin is. He thinks this is a bunch of heebie-jeebie. So he's going to do the tanning. He's going to do the ibud of the hides. Maybe he'll have in mind that I'm doing this to process the hides so that you can make parchment out of it. But he's not going to have in mind l'shem kedushas tefillin. He doesn't know what kedushas tefillin is, and he follows his own mindset. He might nod to the Yisrael. The Yisrael's telling him, make sure you do it l'shem kedushas tefillin. He might go, yeah, oh, for sure, yeah, tefillin. But he's not doing it. He knows that the Yid can't climb between his ears. So he's going to have in mind whatever he wants to have in mind. He's not going to listen to the Yisrael. That's the sheet of the Rambam. And the Rambam would say that this is true, even if the Ein Yehudi says, yeah, I did what the Yisrael wanted. Doesn't matter, we don't buy it. Ein piv v'liba shavin bazeh. We don't believe that what he's saying and what he's really thinking are the same thing. Aval a Rosh svirle, but the Rosh disagrees with the Rambam, and the Rosh holds, the kevan shehu oimed al gabav, batchila, since the Yisrael was standing over the Ein Yehudi at the beginning of the Ibud process, at the point that the Ein Yehudi was putting the hides into the lime, the Yisrael was Omer al Gabav, and the Yisrael instructed the Ein Yehudi, make sure that you are placing these hides into the lime for the sake of the mitzvah of Tefillin. Says the Rosh that that's okay. All we're asking the Ein Yehudi to do is to concentrate for 5 seconds. When you're putting the hide into the lime, concentrate for 5 seconds that you're doing it l'shem tefillin. Says the Rosh, we listen to the Ein Yehudi when he says that for a few seconds, or for a minute, or for 2 minutes, he was concentrating on doing it lishma. And we assume that he did it lishma. But if there was a Yisrael Omer al Gabav, so an Ein Yehudi is starting the tanning process, and he has a Yisrael Omer al Gabav, and the Yisrael says, I had in mind when the Ein Yehudi was doing it that it should be done lishma. So what? That's worthless. He didn't do anything. The Ein Yehudi did it. And says the Mishnah Berurah, even if the Yid tells the Ein Yehudi clear that you must do it lishma, if he wasn't Omer al Gabav, if he wasn't mamish standing next to the Ein Yehudi when he said it, kol she'omen merachik ve'enim alamdai, if the Ein Yehudi is standing a little bit away from the Yid, and he doesn't get into a discussion with him, and the Yid doesn't teach him what it means to do it lishma, la'imahani afilu l'harash, even according to the Rosh's more kuludika opinion, that would not help. Now, the Mechaber said that according to the Rosh, the Yisrael should be oimed al, the Yisrael should tell the Ein Yehudi that he should do it lishma, and then the Mechaber said, Im Yisrael oimed al gabav, if the Yisrael is standing over him, v'siyoy, and he helps the Ein Yehudi make the tefillin. Now the Ramah says over here, the bottom line in the Mishnah Berurah Hagah, ktsas bi'ibuda. The Yisrael has to help the Ein Yehudi a little bit during the ibud process. He brings this down from the Beis Yosef in the name of the Rosh and the Torah. Turn the page. And that's the way we are noying. So again, what did we say over here? We said if an Ein Yehudi does the ibud process, we have a machlokes rishonim. According to the Rambam, we cannot use the tefillin if the Ein Yehudi did the ibud process. Not only that, but even if there was a Yisrael Omer al Gabav, even if there was a Yid watching what the Ein Yehudi, trying to refocus the camera, even if there was a camera. even if there was a Yid. No. All right. It's the best it's going to be for right now. I hope, I see it's a little bit blurry, but I don't know why I can't get the... Okay, there we go. It's the black of the robe. Threw it off. Okay, so again, if an Eina Yehudi did the Ibud, so according to the Rambam, it's puzzle. Even if there's a Yisrael Oibad al Gabav and the Yisrael is telling him, make sure you do it Lishma, the Rambam holds that doesn't work because the Rambam holds that the Eina Yehudi does what he wants. Even if he nods and he shuckles and he says, yeah, I'm doing what you told me, it doesn't help. According to the Rosh, it does help. If the Yisrael is Oibad al Gabav and the Yisrael is telling him to do it Lishma, and the Yisrael helps out a little bit, then it does help. Explains the Mishnah Berurah why, according to the Rosh, does it help? Because the Rosh says, if you're asking an Eina Yehudi to concentrate for 5 seconds on something, for a Shamu Etes, he'll do it. But the Mechaber said that it works according to the Rosh if the Yisrael is Omer al Gabav, V'siyai, and the Ramah said K'tzas Pa'avoida. It helps if he's helping the Eina Yehudi in the Ibud process. He helps out a little bit. That's what it helps. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Chavtes, K'tzas, Afilu em loy siyai rak b'soif ha'ibud. He says that even if the Yisrael only helps out at the end of the Ibud process, he didn't help out in the beginning, he helped at the end. V'afilu gam ze ha'siyua loy rak b'shutvis ima'akum. And even if the help that the Yisrael did, he didn't do anything independent. He didn't do a specific part of the Ibud process on his own, the Yisrael. He helped the Eina Yehudi. That's what shutfis means. Maybe the hides were heavy. So he helped the Eina Yehudi lift up the hides and put them in the line. Even if it's only b'shutfis. So even if it's only at the end of the process, maybe taking the hides out, and he only did it b'shutfis. He only helped out. He didn't do anything on his own. Still kosher. And not only that, continues the Mishnah Berurah, he says, V'chol zeh mitzvah ba'alma. This whole idea of siyua, the whole idea that Yisrael has to help the Eina Yehudi, is only la mitzvah ba'alma. It's not really required strictly al pidin. Aval b'di'evet la'rosh kosher afilu lo siyai klal. B'di'evet, according to the Rosh, since the Rosh says that the Eina Yehudi listens to the Yisrael and he follows the Yisrael's instructions, so then if the Yisrael told him to do it l'shem mitzvah tefillin, we assume he did it l'shem mitzvah tefillin. Da'akam adayta the Yisrael ha'mitzavehu lasis l'shma avad. Okay. Now I'm going to go through Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed over here on Mem Gimel Lamed Beis, which really is most of the Mishnah Berurah here on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, so it helps us pick up some time on the Dirshu schedule as well. It's a technical Mishnah Berurah, but let's go through it quickly. Says the Chavetz Chaim v'chein noyagin. The Ramah said that that's the way we're noyag. We're noyag like the Rosh. What does that mean? We're noyag to allow an Eina Yehudi to do the Ibud process, but a Yisrael tells the Eina Yehudi that he should do it lishma, and he's oimer al gabav. He oversees the work being done by the Eina Yehudi, and he helps the Eina Yehudi out somewhat in the tanning process. That's what the Ramah said. Now says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed. V'haminig lefi divrei achrayim, the custom according to the achrayim lechatchila, if you want to do it lechatchila and you're employing the use of an Eina Yehudi, tzarich lihiyos kach. This is what you have to do. Sheyasem ha'Yisrael ba'atzma ha'oros l'sarich hasid lishma. First of all, the Yid should take the hides and put them into the Sid by himself. And he should do it l'shem kedushas mitzvah tefillin. V'yomer la'akum, and then he should instruct the Eina Yehudi shekol shar meleches ha'ibud sheyaseh, who? That all of the rest of the tasks of the Ibud process that the Eina Yehudi will do, yaseh gam ken lishma. He should also make sure to do them lishma. So, the Yid takes the hides, puts them into the Sid, into the lime, l'shem kedushas mitzvah tefillin. That's the beginning of the Ibud process. Then he turns to the Eina Yehudi and he says, you see what I just did? I just put the hides into the lime and I said I'm doing it for the sake, for the holiness, for the sanctity of the mitzvah of tefillin. Everything else that you have to do now for the ibud process, you should do it the same way. You should say that you're doing it l'shem tefillin. And then, once that's done, the Eini Yehudi could go, he could take the hides out of the lime on his own, and he could prepare the hides the way he's supposed to do it. The Yisrael no longer has to oversee the work of the Eini Yehudi, and he doesn't have to help him out anymore. So says the Mishnah Berurah, you want to know how it should be done l'chatchila? If you're employing an Eini Yehudi, the way it should be done is the Yisrael should start off the process on his own. The Yisrael should put the hides into the lime solution all by himself at the beginning of the process, and he should say that he's doing it l'shem kedushas mitzvahs tefillin, and then he should instruct the Eini Yehudi that the Eini Yehudi should do everything else l'shem kedushas mitzvahs tefillin, and now the Yisrael doesn't have to help, he doesn't have to be there, he doesn't have to oversee, he doesn't have to anything. Now the Mishnah Berurah goes into a series of what-ifs. V'im nasan Yisrael la'aretz ba'atzmai l'sech hasid l'shma v'lo yamar klom l'ha'akim. Let's say the Yisrael started off the process l'shma. He put the hides into the sid l'shem kedushas mitzvahs tefillin, and then he left. He didn't give any instructions to the Eini Yehudi at all. Kasav ha'pri begadim, the pri begadim writes the tzarich iyan bazeh. Whether or not this is kosher, tzarich iyan. Ki lefi divrei Abeis Yosef b'Yerdei b'Siman Reish Ayin Aleph kosher afilu divrei Rambam v'habach oiser. He says we have a machlokes over here. The Pri Begadim says that according to the Beis Yosef, this would be kosher, even according to the Rambam, who's more machmer. And the Bach says it wouldn't be good. So the Mishnah Berurah says it would be tzarchiyim. Achein, lefi divrei Anoida b'Yehuda b'Siman Kuf Ayin Hey Ayin Sham u'b'Yurei Agoyin Ma'aram Banit al Mordechai Sefer L'Chasevet Torah yesh lahakol b'di'evet. He brings down these sheetas who say that we could be makel. V'im siyoy Yisrael lo ha'akol ksas b'soif. Let's say another case. Let's say what happened was the Eini Yehudi did everything, and then the Yid came and he helped out the Eini Yehudi a little bit at the end of the process. Ubazeh gamar malechas ha'ibud. He went, the Yid came all the way at the end of the ibud process, and he helped out the Eini Yehudi all the way at the end, and he completed the ibud process, helping out the Eini Yehudi and saying that he was doing it lishma. But he never told the Eini Yehudi that he should do anything lishma. That certainly does not help, says the Mishnah Berurah. The Messiah ain't by mamish, because the little bit that he helped at the end and he did it lishma, that doesn't accomplish anything. But that's only true if the last step, where the Yisrael came and helped, it was only that he helped. But if the Yisrael finished off the ibud process on his own without any help from the non-Jew, let's say the Yisrael came and he took the hides out of the sid before the tanning was complete, and then and then he put it back into the sid lishma. Okay, so some very technical halachas. Don't imagine anybody over here is really going to do tanning on the leather, on the hides for their own tefillin, but here we get a basic idea. We know that the halacha is that you're required to have a lishma. We see a machlokes rishonim whether or not you could employ an Eini Yehudi in the tanning. We see that there are ways we paskin that you can do it with an Eini Yehudi, how you have to properly instruct him. The Mishnah Berurah told us that lechatchila what should be done is that the beginning of the tanning process should be done by a Yisrael all by himself. A Yisrael should take the hides and put them into the sid, into the lime solution, and he should do it lishma. Then he should turn to the Eini Yehudi, and he should tell the Eini Yehudi, I did this l'shem kedushas mitzvahs tefillin. You should undertake to do all the other steps of the tanning process. Likewise, l'shem kedushas mitzvahs tefillin. And at that point, the Yisrael could leave. He doesn't even need to oversee the rest of the tanning process. He doesn't need to be oimer al gabav and that's it. Everything would be okay. All right, we'll stop over here with Sif Yud. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The source of Limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shem should say Yeshua for Parnassus should do to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the BS God Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.